Well, the investigation report stated that Corporal Alan Smith was justified in shooting Mr. Seth Allen. And the Bureau also recommended that Corporal Alan Smith be given an appropriate award for his actions while guarding the two victims. In the morning, Alan took Susan and Roger to the doctor's office and waited to take them home again. When they arrived at Mrs. Murdoch's home, Susan turned to Alan. "Alan, will I see you again?" Alan replied, "Well, I'll be on paid leave until the shooting investigation is completed. May I take you and Roger out to dinner once or twice?" She replied, "Yes, but could you come and dance with me once in a while?" Alan answered her, "Yeah. How about I come about 7 o'clock tonight? I can see Roger and then we can dance." They agreed. Then Susan leaned over and took Alan's face in her hands and kissed him firmly on the lips. Then she giggled, slid out of the patrol car, and went inside, waving goodbye. Alan sat for a while, then drove the patrol car to the sheriff's office, got his own car and went to get a little rest. Things were definitely where they needed to be. Teresa and Roger could now walk to the other's house without fear. They studied together, played, read, and talked every afternoon, all day Saturday, but they rested and finished their schoolwork on Sunday after church. I really don't know if they ever got the trucks to play with, the trucks which they were going to get when all this started. Alan took Susan to the house where she had lived. Even though it brought back the memory of everything she and Roger had suffered, she needed to see if there were still some things she might need. She found several things, mostly documents, the deed to the property, school records, some photographs and such, toys and books for Roger. The remainder of the personal stuff, she and Alan boxed up and took to the dump. Alan and Susan began to date. Pastor Dan advised them to enjoy light dating for a while. He thought that Susan might have a romantic notion about her protector. That, he felt, needed to be made clear before their relationship went any farther. Alan and Susan were having dinner. Roger was with Teresa at the Murdochs' home eating with them. Susan asked, "Alan, do you think Dr. Phillips would hire me?" Alan answered, "I don't know, he has a receptionist." Susan laughed and responded, "No. I'm a doctor and a board-certified pediatrician. Do you think he could use me?" Alan answered, "You would have to ask him." After a bit, Alan excused himself and left. Susan called Dr. Phillips and asked for a few minutes of his time to discuss the possibility of her working with him in his practice. She was told to come to his office at lunchtime. Susan called Amanda and asked if she could take her to the doctor's office. Amanda picked her up and took her to the office. Susan promising to have lunch with her afterward. She took her diplomas and certificates to show Dr. Phillips. After a short discussion, she was part of Dr. Phillips' practice as a pediatrician. That evening Susan waited dinner for Alan, but he didn't show. Disappointed, she and Roger ate, and Roger got ready for bed. After his bath, Roger asked about Deputy Allen. Did something happen to Deputy Allen? Why didn't he come for dinner? Susan replied, "I don't know, honey, I don't know. I hope we will see him again soon." Alan avoided the street where Susan lived. He tried not to go anywhere she might be. However, as the deputy on duty one evening, he was called to a home where an infant had been found unconscious. He arrived before the ambulance. The mother brought him in to see the baby. The skin was turning blue. As a trained EMT, Alan began mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. After a few minutes, the baby started to breathe on her own and scream like a banshee. When Alan picked the baby up, he noticed blood on the sheet. He looked at the back of the child's head and saw where the baby's scalp had been bleeding. When he turned to the mother, he demanded, "What happened here?" The mother recoiled, "Oh Lord, I don't know." The ambulance arrived, and Alan gave the baby to the EMT and followed the ambulance to the hospital. The mother of the child rode with the baby in the ambulance. At the hospital, the doctor on call called Susan and asked Alan to bring her to the emergency room. Without saying a word, Alan drove to Mrs. Murdoch's house to find Susan waiting on the porch for him. Nothing was said as they drove to the hospital. He parked his patrol car, and they went in. The on-call doctor briefed Susan as they went into the examination room. Alan sat in the waiting room with the baby's mother. After a while, Susan came out with the baby in her arms. She addressed the mother. Gabriele will have to stay in the hospital overnight. I want her monitored to make sure that there is nothing critically wrong. Susan turned to Alan. Deputy Smith, may I speak to you privately? She motioned with a motion of her head. Alan and Susan went into the examination room. Alan, this is child abuse. Alan winced. Are you sure? Of course, you are. I'll report this to Sheriff Murdoch immediately. Susan said, Alan, Roger and I miss you. Alan turned his head. As you can see, I'm on night duty. Our hours are different. Susan noticed that his voice had gone a little cold. Roger misses you. He replied, I miss Roger, too. Can I come and see him on Saturday? Susan said, yes. Then she whispered, Alan, I miss you, too. Alan looked away. I had better call Sheriff Murdoch. Alan stepped out of the room and called the sheriff and explained what had happened. Sheriff Murdoch told him to take the mother home, check the house, check any other occupants, lock the room where he had found the baby, and tape it off. He would send Deputy Amber Clark to start the investigation. Alan and Amber would be the investigating team. Amber arrived, and they began their investigation. They questioned the mother, the brothers, and sister. They started a forensic examination. What they found was that the younger brother had been playing with the baby and accidentally caused the baby to fall and cut the baby's head. He was scared and put the baby in its crib and hid in his closet. He and Amber returned to the sheriff's office to complete their reports. By the time all that was finished, they were both exhausted and hungry. Alan suggested that they meet at the truck stop for breakfast. Amber agreed, and they met and had breakfast. While they were waiting, Amber asked Alan, doesn't this night duty make it hard to see Susan? He looked away. Yeah, but we're not seeing each other anymore anyway. She leaned forward. Why? What happened? Hesitantly he replied, nothing happened. We're just not that compatible. Looking at his feet, he continued, I guess the whole thing with her husband, the shooting, and everything just made us think we might be a couple. But Pastor Dan's advice was well taken. Amber had watched him and opened her mouth to say something, but about that time, Shelley brought their breakfast. So, they bowed their heads and silently prayed, and they began to eat. After breakfast, Amber spoke up. Alan, what's wrong? You love Susan, and you love Roger. He started to turn away when Amber said, don't turn away. I'm serious. What's wrong? He looked at the floor. Did you know she's a doctor? Amber replied, so. He said, I'm just a dumb cop, with a high school GED. She's making 5 times in a week what I make in a month. I'm just a stupid jarhead. Alan took the bill, went and paid it and left, without saying another word. Amber went to the doctor's office to see Susan. She asked, Susan, what's the deal between you and Alan? Susan's eyes misted up. I don't know. One evening we were having dinner, and I asked him if he thought Dr. Phillips would hire me. He said that the doctor already had a receptionist, and I told him I was a doctor. Then things got a little cold, and except for the baby last night, I haven't seen him. Amber asked, do you love him? She answered, yes, I love him more than I can say. This really hurts. Amber related the conversation she had with Alan. He said you were a doctor. Then he said, I'm just a dumb cop, with a high school GED. She's making 5 times in a week what I make in a month. I'm just a stupid jarhead. Susan teared up. Is this some kinda stupid male ego thing? Amber replied, yes, and no. It is something about the makeup of a man. But it's not really ego. Susan started to cry. Oh, Amber, what can I do? Amber replied, holding Susan, you're going to have to talk to him. Make him understand that you need him, that he is your hero, and that you love him. Look, I'll go try to get him to meet you. Would your place be best? Susan answered, yes, maybe for dinner with Roger and me. Amber stood. Okay, I'll call you and let you know what he says. Amber convinced Alan to have dinner with Susan and Roger that evening. She called Susan and relayed his acceptance. Susan went to the local market and bought the things needed to cook Alan's favorite dishes. She asked Dr. Phillips if she could take off the afternoon and explained why. Dr. Phillips agreed and drove her home. Susan, you're going to have to get a car. She replied, you're so right. Thank you. I'll see you Monday. Alan arrived just before 5 o'clock. Everything was very subdued that evening except Roger's enthusiastic greeting seeing Deputy Allen. After dinner, Alan and Roger wrestled on the living room floor for a while. Susan asked Alan when he had to leave for duty, and he said that this was his day off. "Alan, can you stay a little while after Roger goes to bed?" "I haven't danced since Amber was here." He replied, "I guess so. But I'm not too sure about dancing." Roger went to bed. Susan turned on the radio and asked Alan to dance with her. At first, Alan was reluctant, but he eventually started to dance with her. She said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "I understand you were a Marine. Where did you serve?" He replied, "Vietnam. 3 tours." She smiled at him. "Would you tell me about it?" Alan abruptly turned away from her. "No." Startled, she stepped up behind him and gently touched his shoulder. "Why?" Alan turned to her, tears running down his cheeks. "I came home after my first tour, and you know what my fellow Americans did to us, to me? They threw rocks at me, they spit on me, they called me a murderer and a baby killer. My family threw me off the property. My dad said that they had held a funeral for me and he never wanted to see me again." Susan put her arms around him and held him as all the pain, rage, humiliation, and shame poured out in gigantic sobs. "I served my country. And my country hated me." She heard great rasping sobs coming from this man, and she cried, too. "Alan, please, I need you. I need you." He cried those great rasping sobs for a long time. Eventually, he calmed down. "Susan, did you hate me back then? Did you spit on me back then? Did you call me a baby killer back then?" She replied, "No, Alan, I was one of those who supported our military. But I might have given you a flower." He looked at her. "I'm sorry. I guess I'm not much of a man, am I?" She tightened her grip on him. "You are a whole lot of man. The kind of man I need. The man I want. The man I love." Alan said, "You're a doctor, many years of education. Me, I've only got a high school GED. I'm just a dumb cop and an ignorant jarhead. You're a lot smarter than me." Susan looked at him. Not a word came out of her mouth. A long time later, she whispered, "Alan, you are as smart as me, if not smarter. It's just that I had the opportunity to go to med school, while you were serving your country." Alan replied, "I'm a failure, a loser. How could someone like you love a loser like me? How could you love a dumb cop, a stupid loser jarhead?" She said sharply, "Stop that. I'm telling you the truth. I need you. I need you, Alan. I'm told you're one of the best cops on the force. And I'm told you're the most astute investigator in the department." After a while, she blushed a little. "Alan, I want you." She started unbuttoning his shirt. "I want you." He looked at her, "But we're not married." She kept on until she had his shirt off. Up came the t-shirt, and she gave a startled cry. Her fingers moved over his chest, feeling the scars. "What is this?" He replied, "I took 13 AK-47 bullets. If it weren't for a team of medics and doctors, I wouldn't be here." She blinked. "How? What?" "I pulled 27 wounded Marines out of the line of fire. For which I was awarded nothing, except my discharge." Alan grabbed his t-shirt and shirt and started for the door. Susan held onto him, crying, begging him to stay, saying she would not try to seduce him. Alan stopped and put his arms around her. He held her gently saying, "Okay, I won't go. I'll stay for a while." He threw his shirts on a chair, led her to the sofa and snuggled. She caressed his bare chest and shoulders. Alan began to respond and to give back, in kind, what she was giving him. He held her and whispered, "Susan, I do love you. How can I make this up to you?" She reached up to touch his cheek. "Have you thought about a permanent arrangement?" He gently kissed her. "Like marriage?" She smiled. "Yes, like marriage." He looked at her face. "Would marriage work for us?" She replied, "No, we would have to work very hard at our marriage. But I believe we can do it." Susan then determined to do something about the fact that the Marine Corps had not given Alan the award he justly deserved. The next time she had a few minutes to herself, she attempted to call the commandant of the Marine Corps. Of course, she was handed from one office to another until she had to go back to work. She said to herself, "Well, that was a big waste of time. I think I'll write to our congressman. Yeah, that's what I'll do." Without bringing up the subject again, she went to his apartment, let herself in, and went through Alan's papers and found the necessary information for her letter to the representative. Well, maybe the senators, too. Then she sent her letter off to her representative and the state senators also. While Susan was involved with an abused infant, a lone gunman entered the bank and attempted to rob the bank. Alan was advised of the silent alarm and went to investigate. Deputy Amber Clark met him, and the two of them assessed the situation. Things got very dangerous very quickly. The gunman threatened to start shooting the hostages unless his demands were met. Alan took off his sidearm and entered the bank, his hands in the air. What Alan saw was all the bank employees and customers were flat on the floor, some stoic, some crying, some barely conscious. He also saw one lone elderly man with a pistol, shaking, scared, and desperate. Alan, hands in the air, began talking. He told the gunman that there was no way out. He stepped closer, blocking the gunman's view of some of the hostages. Jerry Roberts took advantage of this and began to direct the hostages, a few at a time, to crawl behind the teller's counter and thus to the manager's office and the side door. Alan talked and talked and talked until all the hostages were safely out, except for Jerry and Alan. Alan told the gunman he had no recourse but to surrender. If he were to shoot Alan, he would be labeled a cop killer and cop killers will be caught and even accidentally killed in the whole process. Jerry knew enough to stay out of sight. Several hours later, the gunman realized that what Alan was saying was true, and he handed Alan his gun and began to cry. Alan took the gun, gave it to Jerry, cuffed the gunman and took him outside. Sheriff Murdoch saw that Alan was emotionally drained and sent him home. Tomorrow was soon enough to start the reports. Amber took Alan to Mrs. Murdoch's home. "Do you need someone to stay with you?" Alan shook his head. "No. I'll be okay." Sheriff Murdoch called the doctor's office and told Susan what had happened. Dr. David told her to go home and take care of Alan. Amber stopped by, picked her up and took her home. Of course, Amber told Susan everything about what had gone on in the bank and Alan's and Jerry's role. "I took him to your place. I figured you would be the best medicine for him. He was pretty unsteady. I had to help him into the house." Susan replied, "Oh, Amber, you're the best friend we have." Arriving home, Susan jumped out of the patrol car, thanking Amber, and she ran into the house. Where was Alan? Then she heard a noise in the kitchen, and she became aware of a delicious odor. She went to the kitchen to investigate and found Alan happily making, what? Beef stew. She exclaimed, "Alan, what are you doing, and what is that you're cooking?" He turned and smiled, "Beef stew, biscuits, and apple pie." "How does that sound?" He stepped over to where she was and took her in his arms. "What are you doing here at this hour?"